Hello friends, neighbors, John, your neighbor here. Welcome to the Nook. Welcome to Saturday. Today we're going to talk some 100% rye. Paul gave me a bunch of bottles. Two of them were these Catoctin rye from Virginia. Hopefully I got it right. And this is their regular 100% rye. It's pot stilled, 80 proof or 40%. And then this is their Distiller's edition, still 100% rye, but it's got a little nicer proof or percent on there at 46%. So if you have any Catoctin rye, when you pour that, if you don't, if you have anything that's 100% rye, we're not talking this barely legal 51% stuff. We mean it's all rye. When you pour a dram of that, come on back and let's compare some notes on rye whiskey. 3, 4. Thanks for staying with me. As I said in the opener, we're going to talk Catoctin rye from Virginia. So this rye is, it's been out for a while. I believe Becky and Scott Harris are the ones who founded it, and there's some cool stories on their website about how they started their distillery. But this is, as I said, 100% rye. Rye as it should be. It's all rye grain. I believe it's local. I'm not quite sure on that. But it is pot still, as I said, and then aged in New American oak. But it's young. At least on their website, it said aged at least 2 years. So that's not very long at all. So I'm not sure what else to share. Their website is really cool. It talks a lot about rye, and then they have this whole how to pronounce Catoctin, which threw me at first because it actually is this past brand ambassador who actually does a bunch of mispronunciations, and it kind of messed me up. But I think their name must be a bit fun for them. Catoctin, 100% rye, out of Virginia, nose and taste. You know, it's 100% rye. It's a little bit grassy and herbaceous, spicy, but this one's got a little bit of fruit on it, or a little bit of nut, maybe. Yep, all of those things, but less, you know, like less toffee caramel that I would get in bourbons or ryes with a lot more corn and that kind of buttersweet corn. So it's a little less sweet that way, and a little more herb quality, and a little bit, there's some kind of darker nut already on the nose. Let's give it a taste. Cheers. This is only a 40% whiskey, but it's non-chill filtered, and I suggest that's one of the things that would stand out for you about this whiskey. It is very nicely coating. It's got good oils in it, so it fills the palate, and then as good rye does, it cuts it at the end. It's drying, and that's when I get a little bit more mint, a little bit of light chocolate, or the feeling of cacao, like it's not like chocolate, like milk chocolate, but it's got a little bit of that unsweetened cocoa type quality to it. And then you know, the whiskey still has some sweetness, some candy sweetness, and some spiciness, but it's not overly peppery. So while it's speaking into that drying rye finish, and it's beautifully coating, and it's a little bit herbaceous and grass and a little mint kind of thing going on, it doesn't have as much rye spice. Better take another little palate before we move on. I think, you know, with that second sip, and I really kind of tried to play around with it a bit more in the mouth, speaks to its strengths, which is that really nice, pleasing, oily quality in the palate, and then that drying nature in the finish, but the flavors come back with that little bit of oak, not a little bit. There's actually a fair amount of fresh oak, bit of mint, that essence of chocolate. I said not in the nose, but it didn't come out as much in the palate here. It's a good experience whiskey. It's very much 100% rye. So if you're just getting into rye, it might throw you off. Or if your rye experience is actually big brand Canadian rye, which has very little rye in it, or even American rye is at 51%, I think you'd really notice the drying quality on the end of this, and a little more of that herbaceous mint quality that you get from a full rye. this is pretty tasty stuff. And I happen to be someone who really does enjoy full rye, so this is good. And some of that peppering did come out in the second sip, so there is some black pepper, spicy rye. Well, as I said, Paul lent these bottles to me, and I'm thankful that I've got another version of their rye to compare to here. This one is just known as their Distiller's Edition. Oh, I should say, both of these are single barrels. I think all of their products are single barrels, so there's going to be slight variations depending on what I have in front of me and what you'll be able to buy and taste. This Distiller's Edition, on their website, they didn't say much about it except that, their cask selection is a little more careful, so rarer to find a cask they feel can be a Distiller's Edition, and then it is released at 46. Now they're both non-chill filtered, so I imagine it's going to have some of that same kind of oil quality that we really got even at the 80 proof, but going up to 92 proof or 46%, hopefully we'll give it a little more backbone. Let's see what it does. On the nose, Distiller's Edition, Catoctin rye. Well, that's interesting. I'm getting a little more candied fruit. Yeah, coming back here, it's just a pretty clean rye, but here, yeah, I'm getting a little bit of candied ginger or candied orange peel. Definitely a little more almost brown sugar, a little more, a little bit of orange, and a little bit of that candied cooked quality. And then all very similar notes to this, still a little bit of herbaceous note going on. Yeah, but I have to add that candied, I'm gonna go with orange peel because there's a bit of orange and the candied fruit. Interesting. Let's try it on the palate. Cheers. 46% here, and a different, selection of barrel, I suppose. I am getting a little more spicy, but it could be a little more alcohol heat, of course. It's got more kick to it. I'm definitely getting a broader spice palette, a little more Christmas spice. I'm going to stay with that candied. And in the nose, I was like, well, there's a bit of orange, but here I'm getting a bit of candied ginger. Definitely broader spice palette. Yeah, there's some cinnamon, some Christmas spice, some ginger, some, not quite nutmeg, but it's got a nice bracing of oak, still coating in the palate. The extra percent gives it a little more kick. Let's try another sip. Coming back on the second sip, I'm still going to say, oh, it's got that really nice drying. In fact, it's almost more drying, this one, than the first one here, but a really interesting effect of the palate at the end. And then the finish speaks more spicing here, although it has some fruit, like that orange citrus note going on. Nice spice. This one actually seems to have a little bit more of that herbaceous rye, a little more mint, a little more, that rye grain finish, a little bit of rye grain bread. So there's lots of flavors going on in this 40%er. This one is spicier, richer, and has a little bit more fruit in it. So I think I'm drawn to this, but I'm surprised at how good this 40% holds up, which I think speaks to a couple things. Both these are young ryes, and rye is nice and expressive when it's young. Nothing wrong with a good young rye. The other thing is these are both non-chill filtered, and it really comes across in the experience. It really gives a palate that's almost chewy, and then with that rye, clean, dry palate off the end, it's like an experiential rye. Very cool. I'm obviously liking these, but I like rye, and I'd pour these for friends to try it out. But I would think if you're not someone who drinks 100% ryes, or you find high rye bourbons licoricey or peppery or dill or grassy or any of those things, then you really notice those notes in here, because these 100% ryes, some of them are not this way, but the way they've selected their cuts in the pot still has spoken to the grain here for sure. I like them both. I would happily pour a dram and share this with you. Let me know if you've had Catoctin rye, or if there's another 100% rye that you really like that I haven't had yet, because I've had a few. I'm always on a journey for something else. Thanks for joining me. Hope you guys have a great weekend.